I see our chief is on.
Good morning, Commissioner.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
I figured I wouldn't expose you to my face this early in the morning, but I'll turn it on here in a minute.
I try to provide that courtesy all day long.
Wow.
I have limited bandwidth. I actually use LTE. I don't have cable or anything like that. I'll turn on the camera if I've got a strong signal, but generally I turn it back off because the sound and audio get out of sync.
Huh.
And it just looks funny. You know, I see mouths moving and then it's a second or two before you hear them talking.
Right.
And I figure it's the same way on your end. So I keep my video feed off, and it seems to work pretty good. I see everybody and I can hear everybody clearly.
Yeah.
I know Miss Amir was having that problem. She'll get to where she sounds like she's underwater. So she has to turn off her video.
I know you were having some trouble with your cell phone a week or so ago. Did Miguel get that straightened out for you?
Yeah, we got cell phone all taken care of, and I think I got my iPad. That's why I said I'm using a little different. I'm using my iPad audio. I used to use my phone audio and the iPad for video, but I'm doing it all through the iPad right now. It seems to be working.
Good.
Finally. So, but anyway, how goes the battle?
I think we're doing all right.
Good. I haven't heard too many complaints other than Danielle. She complains all the time.
Yeah, no, that's just something we have to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, sure, Commissioner Bird.
I wouldn't throw you under the bus if you weren't listening.
Is that really a view of your farm or your place out there? The green grass, or is that just?
Yeah, I sit outside. It's changed a little bit. They actually have cut that. That's wheat. They've cut it, and there's some bales sitting out there right now. But yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Nice.
When I'm on the meeting, that's what I look at to stay calm, cool, collected.
Are you coming to town anytime soon?
Me? I have no plans of going over there.
Good morning, Judy.
Good morning. I had to tap to speak.
Good. I was just testing. I'm just testing, making sure that everybody can hear and we can hear them.
Okay, yeah. It's a beautiful day.
Yes, it is. Good morning, Hans.
Good morning, Danielle.
Good morning, Renee.
Good morning, Danielle. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well.
Good morning, Michael. Good morning, Jim.
Morning, Danielle.
Good morning, Danielle. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Hanging in there. It's a lovely day here. Danielle, am I still on deck to present this morning, or is that supposed to be tomorrow?
No, I believe it's today, and I believe what's going to happen is Sarah's going to make you a co-host so you can share your screen.
Gotcha.
Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Good
Good
morning,
morning.
Commissioner.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Happy Cinco de Mayo.
Yes, what a fun day.
So be careful when you're Cinco de Mayoing after 5 p.m. It's a verb only today, Cinco de Mayoing.
Good morning, Commissioner. Happy Cinco de Mayo to you too.
Thank you. Well, it looks like I'll be chairing today's meeting. Chairman Fishman is under the weather.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, he had the strength to let us know by email, so it must be manageable.
Right.
Is that you, Commissioner Byrd?
Of course. Smirking and laughing in the background. That's me.
So I guess today I'm the skipper. Will you be Gilligan?
You bet. Let's see what we can tear up.
Oh, you're perfectly capable of doing that by yourself, but maybe I'm just here to try and contain you.
Oh no. It's kind of backwards though. I'm more in the shape of the skipper and you're more in the shape of Gilligan.
Hey, there's always the millionaire or the professor too. Don't forget them.
I say,
Yeah,
Joseph,
do I have
you
any
look a little bit more
volunteers
like a
that-
professor to me.
Let's fill out the cast. Why don't we?
Yeah, well, Hans has the voice for the millionaire.
The voice, but not the bank account for sure.
Oh, man.
I saw that swank office you have. Throw that up there. Let everybody see your swank office.
Oh, they're getting.
I had it on my dog. Hold on.
Some people have a background that shows the Library of Congress. Maybe I should get that one instead of this majestic state flag. All right, it's 9:30. So we have Commissioner Byrd. Do we have Commissioner Hall on? Commissioner Hall, are you on? Commissioner Vicente Aguilar, are you with us?
Hey, good morning. I'm here.
Good morning,
Good
Commissioner.
morning. I hope you feel better. I think the allergies are getting the best of you.
Yes. I can't avoid the season of the allergies, but I'm fine today. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for being with us. Commissioner Hall, are you with us? Well,
No, but we got the millionaire with us, so we're good.
all right. So we do have a quorum. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Welcome everyone to the Public Regulation Commission's regular weekly meeting. Instead of me appointing someone to do the pledge of allegiance in the state, I'll do it myself. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. State pledge. Commissioner Byrd, why don't you lead us in the state pledge?
You bet. Thank you. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico and the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
Thank you, Commissioner Byrd. All right, we're at item number 2 of the agenda, consideration and approval of the agenda. What's the pleasure of the commission?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
Second.
A second by Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Oops, sorry. Mike, please take the roll.
Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
Commissioner, the agenda is approved by a vote of 3-0.
Thank you. Wayne or Sarah, do we have any special guests?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, no, there's no special guests or public comment for today.
Okay, great. So let's move on to presentations. We're at item 5, Roman numeral 5, presentation regarding interconnection policies from Michael Ropp of Sandia National Labs, Renewable Energy and Distributed Systems Integration Division. Mr. Ropp, is anyone going to introduce Mr. Ropp, or are we just going to go right into the presentation? Is Mr. Ropp here?
I am here.
I see him.
Okay.
Commissioner
Cynthia, do you want to
Maestas,
kick this off?
Commissioner Maestas?
Yes.
Excuse me. I apologize for getting in late. I wasn't accustomed to my new calendar yet. But anyhow, I would, if Steve is not here, I would like to introduce Dr. Ropp, just to say welcome. And we're delighted to have his input. He's been a tremendous contribution so far in our work on the interconnection rule that we're working on. So I was pleased to hear a presentation he made in one of our earlier workshops. It was really quite informative. So I think this will be really an eye opener for all of us. And I wanted to welcome him. Thank you.
And
Thank you, Commissioner Hall.
Commissioners,
Yes, Sarah.
I just wanted to tell Dr. Ropp that I made him a co-host so that he can share his screen if he has a presentation to share.
Okay, great. Please proceed, Mr. Ropp. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Is my audio working?
Yes, we can hear
Yes,
you.
it is.
Excellent. And do you see the screen with the spotted torpedo?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for having me. Thanks, Commissioner Hall, for that introduction. I wanted to talk just a little bit today about some of the screening processes. We've been having several discussions about that in these meetings here. And you've heard a number of good presentations on this already, but wanted to just give you a little bit of feedback on how our practices have evolved over time about how to decide where distributed energy resources can be interconnected and to do so in a quick and inexpensive way. So I wanted to, and if anybody has any questions at any point, I would say, commissioners, would you prefer that we save questions to the end, or should we just take them as we go? What's the usual MO here?
I think it's your preference, sir, whatever you'd like.
Okay. So I'd say go ahead and ask as questions come up so that you remember what it is you wanted to ask.
Okay.
The main, so I'm talking primarily at the distribution level today, so we will not be discussing transmission very much. And I am focused on distributed energy resources that are interfaced by inverters. There are lots of rotating distributed energy resources as well. And we can talk about those, but they're usually handled separately. They have different concerns and challenges and opportunities associated with them than the inverter-based ones. So, because solar and battery storage and these kinds of things are inverter interface, that's where I'm keeping the focus right now. So what are the problems that we have to check for? What are the things that we're screening for at all? The biggest one is things go wrong with the voltage. We can have steady state voltage that gets too high, because if I have too much solar out on a distribution circuit and I'm pushing power back toward the grid, then I can drive the voltage up on my end of the circuit, and people can have problems with that. It shortens equipment lifetime and causes a lot of problems. There are also transient abnormal voltages, which are very short-lived, that happen during things like starting up or shutting down of a system. Certain fault conditions where I have a short circuit to ground, some of those can actually cause low or high voltages on a circuit. It's kind of counterintuitive that a short circuit to ground can cause a high voltage, but that actually is possible in a case where I have one phase shorted to ground and the other two phases are not. There's certain weird esoteric things that can happen that the two unfaulted phases can go to high voltage. So we have to prevent that. This thermal loading basically is just have too much power flowing over the line. It's what fuses and things like that are largely designed to try to prevent. Power quality can be kind of a complex issue. I've shown an example here of two different waveforms. You see the waveform on the left is a nice, beautiful sine wave. Actually, it looks kind of boring, but that is actually what we want in an electrical system. The one on the right, you see, has a bunch of little spikes and things like that. If you're a musician, that's much more interesting. But if you're an electrical engineer looking at a power system, we do not want that, because those extra spikes basically they reduce the lifetime of pretty much everything in the system. So we really do not want those. Power quality can also encompass things like systems turning on and off repeatedly when they're not supposed to, or something like that. So there are some other aspects that can factor in there. You see the two at the bottom: protection coordination and unintentional islanding. So protection coordination, basically, I've mentioned before, short circuits to ground. These circuits are already designed such that if something like that happens, the utility has equipment to detect that condition and stop the fault from being fed by the system. It's to protect human health and safety. It's to protect property, avoid starting fires, all that kind of thing. We don't want distributed energy resources to mess with that, to make it not work. And then unintentional islanding. This is a weird problem that I actually wrote my doctoral thesis on this. Basically, if the distributed energy resource loses its connection to the grid, it has to know that and then take appropriate action. And under certain circumstances, it can be really hard to detect. So those are the main things when we start talking about issues that we want to screen for, that we have to look at. This is what we're talking about on distribution systems. So how do we look for these problems? So you've heard a little bit, I think Tom Key from EPRI mentioned this a little bit on one of our previous meetings, that these detailed studies can actually be really, really nice. We have these computer simulation tools that allow us to create I prefer to think of it as a virtual laboratory. I also often hear the term digital twin, but you can build this model of the circuit in your computer software and then run a whole bunch of experiments non-destructively, completely safely. They can give you very accurate results so that they give you quantitative, reliable answers to how these DERs are going to impact the circuit. Now, of course, there's a drawback, right? You can't get something without giving something. The issue with these computer studies, in my previous life, before I came to Sandia, these kinds of studies were one of the main things that I did. And they can be costly. It depends on the situation that you're looking at, what you're trying to study, some of those kinds of things. But they may be only a few $1,000s, which is generally not too bad on a large system, but they can, depending on what you're looking at, run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. They can take several months to complete as well. So they're also costly in terms of time. So while they are a useful and valuable tool, we want to avoid them unless we absolutely need them because of these costs that we're talking about here. So that's what brings us to this idea of screens. What are these faster, cheaper ways of checking for these problems reliably? So, is there a way to do this that we know we're not causing a problem, but then you don't have all this cost associated with these other things? So there's two different ways that we try to do this. You see, it says type tests there in that orange, yellow. What color is that? Whatever color that is. When we designed IEEE 1547 for distribution, and we are now in the process of completing IEEE P2800, which is the same kind of thing except targeted at transmission. So today I'm going to stick with 1547. When the 1547 standard was designed, it sets up a set of performance criteria for the inverters. And then inverters are certified under Underwriters Laboratory Standard 1741. That's that UL 1741 there. So the idea is that if your inverter is certified under UL 1741, it has been certified to meet certain requirements that get rid of some of the problems that we're talking about. So for example, I showed you that waveform distortion thing under power quality. That's something that's specific to the inverter. And we can test the inverter to make sure it doesn't do that. So we certify it, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. We really don't need to think about that once we're installing them because they've been certified not to do that. Unintentional islanding, I mentioned before, is kind of this vexing, weird issue. Again, there is a type test where we test the inverter to make sure it's got controls built in so that it doesn't do that. It can detect this problem and take care of it itself. So the first thing that we like to try to do is to say, all right, just require inverters that are certified under 1741. And that gets rid of a lot of these kinds of problems. So I toss that out to the commissioners as one effective way to eliminate large classes of problems. Some other issues, like for example, the steady state overvoltages, thermal overloads, those kinds of things that we talked about a minute ago, those are more system level. They don't rely on just the inverter. So for those, we would like to try to rely on some kind of a screen, which is just a simple yes, no threshold. Is it above the screen? Is it below the screen? Now, the problem with screens is they're very quick, easy, and cheap and can be applied, by anybody. But the main issue is that in order to avoid compromising safety and reliability, you have to set your screens conservatively. And what I mean by conservative is that we're going to trigger a certain number of unnecessary studies. So that's what we're trying to set up the screens to minimize the number of unnecessary studies that we have to do. So if you'll allow me to use a visual analogy, I'm a very visual guy, and this kind of helps me think about it. So to figure out how well a screen works, think about the total space of distributed energy resources that we want to interconnect to a distribution circuit. So I'm going to look at system size on the horizontal axis here. And on the vertical axis, I'm just going to use this situation complexity, kind of a qualitative measurement, but we're looking at a number of different factors of just how odd or non-standard the situation is. So down here in the lower left corner, I have systems that are small, that are very simple. I know I don't need a study. So down there's some places of the systems that don't need a full computer study. Up here in the opposite corner, sorry, boxing match going on here. We do need a study up there because it's a big system. It's a complex situation. All right, we better sit down and figure out what's going on. So in between the two, there is a boundary somewhere. And again, because of vagaries in the system, usually it's not going to be a straight line. It's going to be some oddball. I drew this arbitrarily, but it's going to be some strange thing that looks like this. It's not going to be a nice, simple, cut and dried sort of situation. So now let's look at, okay, how did the screens work? So you're probably all familiar with the most basic screen, which is just based on the system size. It just says, look, any system over a certain size, you have to do a study. So let me draw that on the chart here. So again, extremely simple, easy to apply. Now I have to set that fixed system size threshold such that all of the cases that need a study get a study. So what I've done here is I've drawn this line so that it triggers the minimum number of unnecessary studies. And as you can see in this area here between the dashed white line and the two colored lines, there's quite a bit of unnecessary study going on there, right? So this screen, it's very simple, very easy to apply, but it causes a lot of things to go through to study. And by the way, I should mention, for a lot of smaller systems in less complex situations, the cost of a study can at times render the project unfeasible. So this is a very good reason why we don't want to do these unnecessary studies. So we can start looking at a better screen. So we talked about minimum circuit section load. I mentioned that very briefly last time. I think several of our other speakers did as well. So that starts to trim this region of studies that don't need to be done. And we can start going to more complex screens that actually have more than one criterion. And then you get more than one line. So you can do something like this. And you see this is labeled this IPV comma max screen. I'll show you in just a minute exactly what that is. Don't worry about it for right now. But it's got a couple of built-in thresholds in it. And what it does is it allows us to have more than one boundary so we can start snugging up against those lines a little bit better. So this is what these screens do for us, is they start shaving away at the unnecessary studies that we need to do. You'll notice there will almost always be a few, because I can get more and more and more complex screens, but pretty soon the screen's more complex than a study. So there's almost always going to be a few unnecessary studies triggered, but we can minimize them if we choose the screens carefully. So we talked about this one quite a bit before. This is that 100% of minimum load screen. You want to use 100% of minimum daytime load if you're talking about a PV plant. At this criterion here, you notice I've got a distribution circuit drawn here schematically. I have 4 zones drawn here. The grid's over there at the left. And you notice that I've got fatter lines over at the left and skinnier lines over at the right. Most distribution circuits look something like this, that for cost reasons, the utility will use the smallest wire they can that does the job. So as I get farther and farther away, and I've got less load out there, I'm serving fewer customers, something like that, then we'll use a smaller conductor. And the ability of that conductor to handle more current in either direction, either toward the load or from there because of DERs, goes down. So I have to look at these different zones and figure out, like, if I'm putting the solar in one of these zones, then I rate it according to the minimum load in that zone. So this is a relatively simple screen. Now, what I have found historically, and if we have any utility folks on the line, I'd be interested after the presentation to hear their take on this. But what I've seen is that we don't really always know with good accuracy what the minimum zone load is. Again, for a lot of cost reasons, we may not have the measurements at the individual zone levels. Some of these zones may already have some PV in them. So if I do take a measurement, what I'm actually getting is the net load, not the actual load out there. The net load is not the parameter I need. So this screen, while it's, again, relatively simple and you can see how it works, it can be a little bit of a challenge because we may not have all the data we need to be able to make it work. So the screen that I personally kind of see as the state of the art screen that we use right now, this is that IPV comma max screen that you saw had 2 lines on the chart that I was showing you before. There are 2 criteria that we apply. And for those of you who are not particularly interested in the math, don't worry about it. But what we've got here are 2 different criteria. One of them is looking at the voltage rise. Remember, that's one of the issues that we looked at before, that are we pushing the voltage up too far at the end of the circuit? The other one is the thermal overload. That's that ampacity that you see in the bottom equation. We're directly checking those 2 things to make sure that we don't have an issue. So if I were going to put a PV plant, say where that green dot is over there, then what I would look at is I have to look at what's called the source impedance from that point all the way back up to where my voltage is regulated, which is usually at the substation. Typically, utilities know that. It'll be in their distribution circuit models, or it can be figured out based on knowing what the conductors are. and the spacings and so on and so forth. And then that cable ampacity, we know that from knowing what the cables are and then just looking it up on a chart. So those are things that we can pretty easily get. And with a screen like this, then you can really trim down the number of unnecessary studies that you need. Now you see the remark that's in that, again, orange or yellow or whatever. I always rely on my wife for color selections, and I made this color selection myself, so I don't know what it is. But that PNM talked to us before about what they called a circuit rating. It was maybe 2 meetings ago. As I listened to them describe the circuit ratings, it sounds to me like that's very similar to this screen. What's being done to set up those hosting capacity maps is effectively this screen right here. So that's the good news, is I think we're already pretty close to using, at least PNM is pretty close to using what looks like this screen already. So that was just a quick set of prepared remarks talking about these screens. More than happy to answer any questions about this. If you want to talk about the standard 1547 or any of those kinds of things, be happy to discuss that as well.
Any questions for Mr. Rupp and Commissioner Hall? I know you're the lead in the interconnection, updating the interconnection rules. If you want to provide any context to your effort in this presentation, please feel free. And I want to open it up to utility division staff too, if they have any questions or comments for Mr. Rupp.
Thank you, Commissioner Maestas.
Commissioner Hall.
I did want to contextualize it a little bit. I realized that I didn't set that up before, but I wasn't too sure what the content was going to go into. And I'm really glad that Dr. Rupp covered what he did, because one of the big issues in our workshop so far is the issue of which residential and small business renewable systems can safely get connected to the grid. And one utility, PNM, has had enough systems connect so that in some areas of their footprint, they are saying they can't connect anymore unless and until either they or the customers who want to who want to interconnect their systems will spend some money to upgrade their systems, because they have the maximum amount of photovoltaic systems already connected on that feeder line or whatever. So that is a technical issue that's being worked on by one of the subcommittees in our workshop series. And fortunately, we have people like Dr. Rupp who know a whole lot about this topic, so that they can explain and work on the issue and try to come up with a solution that will enable, the level of integration of photovoltaics that people would like to implement while keeping a stable, reliable grid. So this has just been a real eye-opener. I encourage people to drop in and listen when there are presentations, and we'll continue to let you know. Sometimes, actually, probably from now on out, the workshops will probably just consist of workshop meetings themselves, so it won't be quite as educational as this, but I anticipate having a few more presentations along these lines, just to keep people kind of updated with what this topic is. And so I'll just turn it over to you again, Vice Chair Maestas, so other people could ask questions.
Thanks for providing that context, Commissioner Hall. Any questions for Dr. Rupp? Any questions? Any questions?
All
right.
Everyone to sleep.
Dr. Rupp, I thank you for the presentation, and please convey our thanks to your wife for the color selection. I thought it was very good.
Thank you very much.
Please come back again and enlighten us on any further developments in DER and screening and inverters. So we appreciate the technical perspective and kind of what we're doing in our interconnection efforts. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Maestas. And hopefully folks had a chance to get my email address there. If anybody wanted to drop me a question, via email, that's totally fine as well.
Do you want to just restate your email address one more time?
Sure. Sandia is another one of these that you can guess and guess and guess and never get it right. So yeah, it is MEROPP, ROPP at sandia.gov.
Okay. Thank you. We appreciate that. All right, let's move on. Next, we have a presentation from John Reynolds and Mike Ripberger on the 2021 legislation that impacts the PRC. You can see all the pieces of legislation listed there, and I think this was requested by Chair Fishman. So who's going to lead off, John or Mike?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioner.
Good morning, John. Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is John Reynolds, Utility Division Director, and I will start off, Mr. Chair, with the Environmental Database Act, and Mike will follow me with the three pieces of legislation dealing with broadband rural telecommunications. So the Environmental Database Act is pretty straightforward. This will be a brief presentation from my end. It provides for the development and operation of a web-based portal that will be hosted by University of New Mexico's Museum of Southwestern Biology. And the goal is to house a searchable, map-based compilation of environmental data that will be provided to the host by a number of state agencies, 7 state agencies. And that includes energy, minerals, natural resources, Environment Department, and the Commission. The Commission, well, it's specific about certain items that we are required, some data that agencies are required to provide to the host. And in the case of the Commission, the data is the location of electric transmission lines. The Act also, that has some limitation. It doesn't require disclosure of information that is confidential by state or federal law, or of information that is required to remain confidential for safety or security reasons. The timing on this project that is being led by UNM's museum by the host is that an information exchange process is to be established by the end of this year, by December 31st, and the database is to become active, available by July 1, 2022. And as far as the impact on the agency, we have some information about location of electric transmission lines, but it will come from cases, applications made by utilities over a long period of time for certificates of convenience and necessity for transmission lines. And transmission lines have a long life. So some of these, very long life. I mean, some of these cases will be decades old, and it will require some digging. A lot of this is stored, if not all of it, is stored on eDocket. And whether it meets the requirements of the host, this will be something that will have to be developed over time. If the data needs to be more precise or more up to date, there is a question about whether the PRC has the authority to get transmission line location from owners of transmission lines, which largely would be IOUs, but not necessarily all IOUs. So that's an open question at this point. The burden, to provide this information, pretty straightforward, will be to dig up cases where this information would be would be located, and to look up the the data that we have, or the information that we have. So at this point, I don't have any specific recommendation to the commission other than administrative in nature. We should probably appoint an agency contact for the host, and and reach out to UNM at some point in time and let them know, so that we're available when this information exchange process is developed. And as a side note, this kind of information, this database could be useful down the road in location approval cases. To have this sort of central database of environmental data could prove to be useful to applicants and to the stakeholders in the commission and a review of those applications. So that's my presentation concerning the Environmental Database Act, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for John? Thank you, John, for that summary of this bill and the impacts to the agency. Any questions?
Mr. Vice Chair, I just wanted to ask John, he might have mentioned it and I didn't catch it. Do we have deadlines for providing that information, or for any other reason under that statute?
The host, UNM's Museum of Southwestern Biology, is required to establish an information exchange process by the end of this year. And the database, the website, is required to be active July 1 of next year. So those are the only deadlines in the statute. And so the deadline on the PRC is to be ready to provide information once the host has established a process.
So that means by the end of the year, the host has to be established, and by middle of next year, is that right? They have to have their database in place. So the first half of next year is the time frame when we would have to be providing information. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Hall.
I was just wondering what sort of a burden that places on staff. Do we have a clue how many cases we may need to dig up and plumb?
I mean, I think the burden will be, meaningful. I don't know that it will be significant. I mean, we have what we have at this point, and, whether we'll meet the requirements of the data that the host is seeking, that's an open question at this point. I mean, we may have drawings. Do we have precise GPS coordinates for transmission lines? I can tell you the answer to that is no. But we do have drawings for transmission lines that were submitted in the applications. Whether we have drawings for all transmission lines, I don't know.
Okay. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. That's it for me, Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for John regarding the Environmental Database Act? John, I had a few questions. Since 9/11, there's been some confidentiality requirements on critical infrastructure, the location. Is there any screening on this data of infrastructure that perhaps has to remain confidential? That's my first question. And my second question is, why couldn't we just ask for the location data of transmission lines instead of digging up cases?
The statute does not require disclosure of information that needs to remain confidential for safety or security reason. So there is that original screen in the statute. And there are, since 9/11, as you say, there are security concerns related to the infrastructure, our grid infrastructure, and transmission lines are critical. So there is restrictions to access that information. Precisely what they are, I don't know. I mean, transmission is a federal FERC regulated activity. So I imagine that there are, but I don't know precisely what those are. And it is not clear whether we have the authority to get that information from the utilities that we regulate. I mean, transmission activity is subject to federal oversight. And so I don't, so that authority to get the information is unclear to us at this point.
Okay, thank you, John. Any other questions for John? All right, John, thank you so much. I guess
you, Mr. Chair.
Mike, you're on to discuss HB 10, Broadband Development Division. Mike, you there? Mike Ripberger.
He was there, but, oh, I see him. He's there, but no sound at this point.
It looks like he's having trouble with his microphone.
And I assume he's going to cover the remainder of these bills since they're all broadband related and telecom related.
He is. He's intimately familiar with these issues, Mr. Chair.
Mike, if you want us to maybe move on and come back to you after you've fixed your microphone, I'm happy to do that.
He's nodding yes.
He's nodding
Okay.
yes.
All right, we'll do that. We'll, yes, Sarah.
Mr. Vice Chair and Commissioners, I had a suggestion for Mike that perhaps he could call in for the voice.
Okay. Would he like to do that right now?
I'll get in
All
touch
right.
with him and let you know. Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on. Let's move on to item 6, consideration and approval. Is that you, Mike?
Yes.
All right, we can hear you. Take it away.
Okay, you don't have the video, but you have the audio. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, let me start with Senate Bill 204. Again, let's introduce myself. My name is Mike Ripperger. I'm the Telecommunications Bureau Chief here at the Public Regulation Commission. Senate Bill 204, what that does is it allows the incumbent local exchange carriers who are designated as ETCs after October of 23rd, 1997, or provided ILEC service after February of 1996 to receive access reduction support from the New Mexico Rural Universal Service Fund. This is approximately $17 or $18 million a year that is distributed to rural ILECs in the state. The only ILEC that this legislation affects is Sacred Wind Communications, and they happen to be the only rural ILEC who currently does not receive access reduction support payments. Now, the legislation says that the amount of support to be dispersed to the eligible carrier shall be no less than the average amount per access line for comparable carriers. And comparable carriers in the legislation is defined as those ILECs with a similar number of access lines. So the criteria is generally fairly easy. And so what's to happen? This legislation should go into effect by, I think, around June 7, 2021. And the commission has 120 days from the filing of a request from the carrier to institute the payment scheme for that carrier. And so I would anticipate that Sacred Wind will probably file pretty quickly after that date passes. Now, what is the effect on the fund? So generally, I would anticipate somewhere in the $1 to $2 million range per year on the fund. Now, Sacred Wind did receive needs-based support annually of $1.4 million, but that ceased December of 2020. And also, on another note, there was true-up payments to carriers for shortfalls they weren't paid in the past for access reduction support of over $1 million a year. That obligation to those ILECs will end December 2021. And also overall, the access reduction support payments have been decreasing due to the loss of ILEC access lines for which they are paid this support. So overall, even though the payments to Sacred Wind from a proceeding at the commission may result in $1 to $2 million in payments from the State Universal Service Fund, I would anticipate overall, even with that obligation, the access reduction support payments to carriers will continue to decrease over time. So that's basically that bill in a nutshell. So maybe I can stand for questions on this bill before I move on to the other two.
Okay, any questions on SB 204, the Rural Telecom Act? For
Mr.
Mike,
Vice
any
Chair.
questions? Yes, Commissioner Hall.
Commissioner Hall, yeah, I've got one question for John. I don't mean John, I mean Mike. Mike, what's the basis for those lines being lost? I think we're talking about like the last mile lines, is that right? That the
Yes,
ILECs
you're
will be
talking
losing?
about the traditional voice lines.
Yes. So
Or
what's
voice
the
lines,
basis
yeah.
for them being lost? Just to fill out that picture.
Well, it's the same reason that voice lines have been decreasing pretty much everywhere. It's from wireless substitution and or going to just strictly broadband only.
Okay. Okay, so as people phase out their landlines, in other words, the ILEC
Yes,
will.
I mean, yes, that's the basis. Their access lines, their voice access lines, as those are people are phasing those out. They're paid on an amount per access line. So as those change every year, the amount of money they get every year is reduced.
Do we know at what rate those lines are reducing? Is there a straight line, or did they reduce a lot at the beginning and not so much now, or is there anything you can describe about that loss of landlines?
I don't have any data available like percent per year, but it's a pretty steady loss.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks very much, Mr. Vice Chair.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Commissioner Hall. Any other questions on SB 204 for Mike? All right, seeing none, proceed, Mike, to the next piece of legislation. You're mixing it up here. So what's next?
Okay. Well, the next two bills, one is Senate Bill 93 and the other one is House Bill 10. These two bills are related. In fact, it was pretty much a similar effort, one in the House and one in the Senate. Senate Bill 93, that was an effort simply to establish a broadband office, and that's been carried out. Other items in that bill, I believe, they attempted to put some of the items from House Bill 10 into that bill, but they gave up on that and just sort of made sure it didn't conflict with House Bill 10. Anyway, Senate Bill 93 establishes a broadband office that is administratively attached to the New Mexico Department of Information Technology. It is to be managed by a director appointed by the governor, and that hire may hire additional FTEs to help run the office. Now, that office is charged with the following: establishing rules for quality of service for broadband for homes, businesses, and public institutions, creating and maintaining an online broadband access map, maintaining a repository for broadband data for New Mexico on a county-by-county basis, developing and providing to the governor and legislator a statewide broadband plan every 3 years. And one of those has already been created, and I guess it would be updated, and coordinating with state and local governments to assist with broadband efforts. And so this is sort of like the central clearinghouse for broadband in the state, and a lot of the statewide broadband efforts will go through this office. Now, DoIT already has a broadband office or program office, but it's a small outfit, and I assume that'll be subsumed into whatever is happening here. But there's already at Do It a robust broadband map, and a broadband plan has already been created with the $10 million allocation to that office previously. Staff and the commission has coordinated and worked with Do It before. We do find their services useful, and they sometimes talk with us about stuff. So that's an ongoing and open relationship, and I assume that will continue. But this bill also relates to the next bill, which is House Bill 10. Would the commission like to ask questions about Senate Bill 93 right now, or wait till I finish with House Bill 10?
Finish up House Bill 10, since they're both interrelated, and then we'll take questions, please.
Okay, great. House Bill 10. Now, the title is Broadband Development Division, because the original intent of the legislation was to create what would have been what was established in Senate Bill 93, which was a broadband office. But House Bill 10 really doesn't create a broadband development division. I guess they can't change the title after they start, but this is what it actually does. And it dovetails into the development or the creation of the broadband office in Senate Bill 93. It creates a Connect New Mexico Council composed of 15 members, 7 secretaries of state agencies, 5 public members with knowledge of broadband, 2 members appointed by the House of Representatives, 2 appointed by the Senate, and 3 members appointed by the Secretary of Indian Affairs. This is a fair-sized council, and they are responsible for coordinating with NMPRC on state agency broadband programs and projects, and making grant awards from the Connect New Mexico Fund, developing a digital equity analysis plan to be presented to the legislature by August 1st, 2023, and that is to be incorporated into the statewide broadband plan. So they will be working hand in glove with the broadband office. Now, this bill also creates a New Mexico fund in the state treasury comprised of appropriations, gifts, grants, and donations subject to appropriation by the legislature and the council. Grants for proposals from this fund are awarded yearly to local governments, state agencies, public educational institutions, tribal governments, and entities created through the Joint Powers Agreements Act. The bill also requires the Connect New Mexico Council to provide an annual report to the legislature on access and the quality of service of broadband across the state. And, the broadband office will be doing some of that quality of service monitoring on their own. Now, here's another thing that this does, and this is where it directly affects the commission. Modifies NMSA 639H3 and 6 to expand the amount of money dedicated to by the State Universal Service Fund for the broadband program from $5 million per year to $8 million per year. It also requires the commission to submit applications to the council to prioritize and align those applications with the statewide broadband plan. So the way it works right now is that staff in conjunction with general counsel puts the broadband projects together in a list. The commissioner reviews and selects. If the commission does that this year, they must also submit it to the council for prioritization and alignment with the statewide broadband plan. Now, the effect of House Bill 10 on the PRC, again, there's the increase in the allocation of $5 million to $8 million that has to be dedicated to the broadband program every year. The commission will have to work with the council to prioritize and select projects to consider digital inclusion and equity as defined by the statute. Requires the commission to report annually to the legislature regarding the State Universal Service Fund and the broadband program. And so it also may require additional proceedings to address legislative reporting requirements, and that would be the changes to the size, structure, and purposes of the fund that I mentioned above, and whether the cap should be modified, maintained, or eliminated. And the commission has actually done this sort of reporting to the legislature before. So that concludes my presentation on Senate Bill 93 and House Bill 10. And so I will stand for questions from the commission.
All right, any questions for Mike? Commissioners, yes, Commissioner Hall.
I had a question about that last statement Mike made about how it sounds like, Mike, tell me if I'm understanding this correctly. It sounds like baked into that statute with respect to the commission's responsibilities in implementing the Rural Universal Service Fund, whereby we get more money, 8 million rather than 5, and we have to coordinate with the commission, with the council. They leave themselves some room to make adjustments there on those provisions. Is that right?
Well, however the commission may go about its selection of projects, the council can take those, whatever is presented by the commission to the council, and they can prioritize it on their own according to their own criteria of digital inclusion and digital equity, and select the ones that they want.
Oh, I see. I might have misunderstood. I thought you were describing a situation where they could vary our requirements or something. So yours sounds a lot more straightforward. Your explanation sounds better than what I thought it was. Okay, great. Thanks. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Hall. Commissioners Byrd and Vicente Aguilar, I know you guys are teaming on, I thought you were teaming on addressing issues of broadband coverage in Pueblo and tribal areas. Do you all have any questions for Mike on this legislation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mike. I think the way the bill was stated as far as the language is concerned, I think they covered from every angle. And I don't have a huge concern, because eventually this legislative bill that Mike just talked about, which is Broadband Development Division, it's going to dissolve our broadband program. That's the intention. So we're getting clear information, and I accept that, and that's where I will end my comment. As far as our 2-year goal to have a broadband conference, that's informational conference for what Michael Ripperger has achieved up to this point, along with Eugene Evans and their staff. It's hats off for their contribution, their work, and that's the intent of the broadband conference. We are in celebration mode on a variety of bills, and our staff, they understand that they will have new bosses in the near future, so they're getting adjusted to that. And what all we're doing, and my thought is that we can just continue to acknowledge the great staff that we have. They planted the seed. They have a successful broadband program with no resource at all. It was planned within our organization. And while I have the microphone, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank many of our staff members that work very hard, because I can feel it, that they enjoy their job. I know Sarah Valencia just joined us very recently, One email just makes me happy that she's bright, she's dedicated, she's enthusiastic, and I like to see that from the staff. Please work with all the commissioners because we're here for, several more months, but I feel good about accepting new legislative bills that were introduced and passed and signed by the governor. Now it's our turn to close many of the programs that were created. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. Any other questions for Mike? Mike, I had one, maybe a comment instead of a question. It seems like the Connect New Mexico Council could have veto authority over our projects. And if that's the case, then perhaps when the council is seated, perhaps we can submit our application and the criteria to them and have them bless the application itself instead of us operating under a different set of priorities and criteria. I'm sure there'll be a broadband plan consistency requirement in the project application process. So I think it's welcome news that the broadband fund is increasing from 5 to 8 million, but it sounds like some of our autonomy in awarding these projects is being curtailed. So what do you think of maybe having them bless our project selection process instead of rolling the dice and operating under our current project criteria and application, and wondering whether or not they'll accept our project recommendations?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I think that, and I got to tell you that Eugene Evans has communicated with Russell Fisk, and they're well aware of this situation. I think that, there's some level of coordination would probably be wise. I think that the plus about what the commission does with its projects and organizing them is that they can see all of that criteria and aspects of all of the projects. The commission can lend its opinions, but if they have all the information and they change it, then they change it. So, but I think that some sort of process of cooperation and but keeping some of the internal processes that work in at least identifying, organizing the projects would be appropriate. But again, Eugene is already in conversations with Russell about this, and so I think they're probably ahead of me on this.
All right, and since it's obvious that I doubt there's any PRC representation in the Connect New Mexico Council, so perhaps we should identify either a broadband office representative or a member of the council to sit on our Universal Service Fund Advisory Committee, just to have that kind of cross-agency representation and communication, instead of it being somewhat adversarial since we're not on this council. And I think that's something that we can do going forward, is it not?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, yes. The advisory board meetings for the State Universal Service Fund are open. And we welcome participation, and I think it would give them a good idea on how it all works. And we can. I guess the council will be. They probably already have the names of the people, but I think it's officially hits the ground probably sometime in June. So after that point, we will look to see who we can communicate with on the council to start building the bridge.
Okay, yeah, let's build those bridges. Good analogy. Any other final questions for either John or Mike on these pieces of legislation that have since passed and have an impact on our agency? Any final questions or comments?
Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Hall.
This isn't a question so much as a comment. I just wanted to say I had thought of that issue myself that you just mentioned. And I, in the interest of governmental efficiency, it almost seemed like, there were two agencies working on the same solutions. And, I'm glad to hear we're coordinating, but it may be that our work may be lessened to some extent if we, if the extent of it is just identifying the projects and describing them and handing them over to the council. That might be a benefit to us in a way. I mean, then we could apply ourselves to other parts of a telecom job, but I don't know if the objective of the council is to have one state locus for broadband, all issues broadband, then it's kind of curious that we're left as outside that circle and but still contributing. So I think as if it ends up operating the way Mike describes, that might be ideal for us.
And we shouldn't be precluded from perhaps including on our legislative agenda some tweaks to this to institutionalize the PRC in its process, to make sure that our list that we submit to the council is really at their whim in terms of whether they accept those projects or not, and prioritize them. So I think that's one of our options in this situation.
Yeah.
And then I just might add too, I think we've already talked about the appropriations bill. There was a $500,000 loan that was included, and it was to fund any mandates in several pieces of legislation that were specifically listed in that bill. And unfortunately, none of these pieces of legislation were listed. The only one that was listed and that passed the legislature was community solar. So we can't use any part of that grant for these pieces of legislation. So anyway, I just thought I'd add that in terms of available funding to carry out these unfunded mandates. All right, let's move on. Thank you, gentlemen. Great discussion. Next is items. Thank you. Item 6, consideration and approval of contracts in excess of 20,000. The first one that's up is contract with Real-Time Solutions to provide PRC website redesign. So is that you, Mr. Jim Williamson? Are you presenting?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Vice Chair and Commissioners.
Good morning.
Share that contract. If Sarah could please make me the co-host, I'll be happy to share that contract, please.
Yes, I'm working on that, Tim. Just one.
And then Jim, if there's probably no need to go through the boilerplate, if you could just maybe focus on the scope.
Yes, sir. Just as a big overview, the scope would be the redesign of the PRC's website with the design and functionality. The total cost would be $49,784.31. This is an approved vendor on our statewide price agreement. Let me see, I'm able to share this now. You guys able to see the contract? The vendor is an approved vendor with GSD, and they're on the statewide price agreement. Annette Reynolds, Sarah Valencia, Miguel Lujan, and myself have been working on this. The vendor can get the contract completed by this fiscal year. We do have available budget. FY22 may not have the budget availability. So with that brief introduction, I stand for any questions. Thank you.
Any questions? I just might add that this is great news. I know this has been on our to-do list for quite some time. Our website is not the most user-friendly. And so it sounds like that's one of the primary goals of this website redesign. So with that, any questions on the scope, on the contract? Any questions at all?
Just as an addition, this vendor has done a lot of work with other state agencies, DFAs, so they have a wide portfolio a website for state agencies. So.
Thanks, Jim. And I've worked with cooperative agreements, and I think it really helps streamline the procurement process when you can piggyback on these GSD cooperative agreements. So great job, and finding a good vendor.
Thank you.
Any questions? I thought I heard maybe Commissioner Hall.
Well, yeah, I did. I just wanted to ask, it's probably not within the scope there, but it's always nice to have the complaint process, something that's very accessible on the front page. So just make sure that's in there, Jim. Doesn't have to be in the scope of work though. But I know that's one thing my office gets feedback about.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Any other comments or questions for Jim? Any comments or questions? Okay, let's take action on each contract as they're presented. So this is an action item, and the action is to approve a contract with Real-Time Solutions to provide PRC website redesign. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Hall, a second by Commissioner Byrd. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none. Mike, please take the roll.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
Contract is approved by a vote of 4-0.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, commissioners. All right, next up is a contract with Real-Time Solutions to provide PRC complaint management application. Jim, is this you again?
Mr. Vice Chair, Commissioners, yes, this is me as well.
Okay. All right.
This is a contract with the same vendor. They're also on the statewide price agreement for $49,083.13, which is including GRT, to be expended here in FY21. This would take the place of our existing complaint tracking software. There would be a recurring component of $6,000 per fiscal year. It would be accessible via the web, via the cloud. So that way, if offices, if there were issues with COVID, it could all be accessible online. And it saves us some money from avoiding upgrading and maintaining web servers that do it. So it's a net benefit to the commission's budget. And with that, I stand for any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Jim on this contract with Real-Time Solutions? I take it our consumer relations staff were very involved in the development of the scope, Jim?
Well, Mr. Vice Chair and Commissioners, we were looking at a potential renewal with the existing vendor, and it was going to be very burdensome, very costly, but consumers would be involved in the development of it, development of the actual software.
Okay, so will this allow for online intake of a complaint since we're redesigning the website? Can we have an online module for people to log on and make a complaint?
Well, Mr. Vice Chair, yes, they would be submitting the online web, they would be doing the design portion of the website, and those would feed into the complaint software, into the module there. So then complaints could be tracked within the module, and reports could be run, complaints by district, dollars saved, by consumer, by issue. It'd be very similar to what we have. It would just be more incorporated because it's the same vendor on both projects.
Right, but can a consumer under the website redesign and this complaint management contract, can a consumer file a complaint online?
Mr. Chair, yes, sir. There would be an online form where you could, the complaint type, do the complaint submission, submit attachments, supporting documentation. Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions for Jim on this contract? This is great news. The website design and kind of improving and streamlining our complaint management, I think, is very good. Any other questions for Jim?
So, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Hall, and then Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
So Jim, let me just confirm, I think I heard you right, that this system will keep track of the number of complaints and the districts they are from? And do they track subject matter as well? Or is there any other category that's tracked besides those two?
Mr. Vice Chair, yes, our existing complaint software does that, does those functionalities on reporting. So we could run all the complaints versus a certain, for example, versus New Mexico Gas Company by district, but by complaint type. So yes, we would duplicate those same reporting capabilities with the new complaint software.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Hall. Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to approve the contract.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I'll second.
All right, a second from Commissioner Hall. Any discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none. Mike, please take the roll.
Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
The contract is approved by a vote of 4-0.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Jim. This is welcome news. All right, next let's go on to item 7, consideration and approval of prior meeting minutes. Mike, should we just approve each set of minutes individually, or can we do it as a group?
I believe the commission can vote to approve both of them together.
Okay, if there are no objections, are there any comments on the minutes as proposed? If there are none, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of the March 24th, 2021 and the April 7th, 2021 open meetings?
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, a motion by Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
A second by Commissioner Byrd. Any discussion on the motion? All right, Michael, please take the roll.
Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
Commissioner Hall.
Aye.
The prior meeting minutes are approved by a vote of 4-0.
Thank you. All right, we have consent action items. What's the pleasure of the commission? I'm not going to read them because I think Mike reads them out before the roll call vote. So it is regarding 2165. What's the pleasure of the commission?
Mr. Chair, I'll move the consent
All right.
action item
Thank you,
to be
Commissioner
approved
Byrd.
as presented.
Okay, we have a
I'll
motion
second.
on the floor and a second by Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. Any discussion on the motion? All right, Mike, please take the roll and read out the project.
Commissioners, this is the vote on case 21-00065 UT, which is the matter of the application of Sierra Electric Cooperative Inc. for continued use of its fuel and purchase power cost adjustment clause and or a variance from the provisions of NMAC 17.9.550. This is a potential order regarding continued use of the fuel and purchase power cost adjustment clause. I will take the roll. Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
Commissioner Hall.
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
The consent action item is approved by a vote of 4-0.
Thanks, Mike. We're moving on to item 9, Roman numeral 9, regular action items. None under transportation. We have utility matter 19-00222 in the matter of the formal complaint of Gladstone New Energy LLC against Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association, Inc. And the action is to potentially approve a potential order to vacate final order. So Judy, take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the commission. This matter comes before you today originally upon a verified formal complaint of Gladstone New Energy, GNE, against Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association, Tri-State, as well as the filing of a petition for a declaratory order concerning PURPA obligations. There was a commission final order adopting the recommended decision. There was an appeal, and the New Mexico Supreme Court order of limited remand dated April 19th, 2021 in the appeal case number S1SC38227, Tri-State Generation and Transmission Appellant versus New Mexico Public Regulation Commission Appellee and Gladstone New Energy Intervenor Appellee. The original complaint was filed on August 6, 2019, alleging that Tri-State did not provide G&E work papers showing input data and calculation of avoided costs. G&E's complaint requested Tri-State be ordered to comply with New Mexico law section 626-4D and the PURPA regulations, and Tri-State be ordered to provide G&E data and assumptions relied upon by Tri-State to calculate its avoided costs. There was a petition for declaratory order that asked the commission to declare there was a legally enforceable obligation between Tri-State and G&E for the entire energy output and capacity of the project for a term of 20 years. And that the effective date of the LEO was the date of G&E's election on June 24th, 2019. The commission determined that it would not entertain the petition for a declaratory order. It did process the complaint. Tri-State opposed it on the grounds that the PRC lacked jurisdiction to grant the relief requested. On March 18th, 2020, the commission adopted, after a public hearing before the hearing examiner, adopted the recommended decision of the hearing examiner and issued a final order ruling that under New Mexico's PURPA rule 570.11.B.2, the commission is authorized to require Tri-State to provide G&E with the avoided cost information requested by G&E. Tri-State filed an appeal on March 30th, 2020, and on March 12th, 2021, a year later, after briefing by Tri-State, the PRC, and G&E, the Supreme Court notified the parties to the appeal that there would be oral argument scheduled on May 5th, 2021. Next, on April 5th, 2021, G&E filed a notice of withdrawal as an intervenor appellee. In its notice, G&E stated that due to the passage of time, it, quote, no longer believes the outcome of the appeal, this appeal will affect its interest. On March 14th, 2021, the remaining parties in the appeal, which are Tri-State and the PRC, filed a joint motion to vacate the oral argument and a motion for limited remand to vacate the order on appeal. In the motion, Tri-State and the PRC stated to the court that the final order, that the appeal concerns a final order to which the party for whose benefit it was entered, in other words, G&E, perceives no benefit and which that party is unwilling to defend. In response to the, in the joint motion, Tri-State and and the PRC asked the court to remand the matter back to the PRC for the PRC to vacate the final order with a reservation of rights for Tri-State and the PRC to potentially make the same legal arguments they made in 19-00222 in the future if the same or similar issues arise. On April 19th, the court issued an order granting the joint motion, vacating the oral argument set for May 5th, 2021, and remanding back to the Public Regulation Commission for the limited purpose of vacating the final order. And if and after the final order is vacated by the commission, Tri-State and the PRC would file a stipulated motion to dismiss the appeal. If the commission does not vacate the final order by July 15th, 2021, oral argument would be reset. So the proposed order states that this 19-00222 is open for the limited purpose of vacating the March 18th, 2020 final order. It also, the proposed order also provides notice to G&E that they have 14 days to file an objection to this vacation of the final order, including a precise reason for the objection and citation to legal authority. If no objection is filed by G&E within 14 days of this order, G&E will be deemed to have waived any objection. Lastly, effective 14 days after this order is issued, contingent upon G&E's not filing any objection, the final order in this matter would be vacated without prejudice to any of the parties in this matter, i.e. G&E, Tri-State, or NMPRC, pertaining to the legal positions that they took regarding the final order if the same or similar issues arise in the future. And I stand for questions.
Thank you, Judy. Any questions on this? As you recall, commissioners, we had been briefed on this before today's meeting, but are there any questions for Judy?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Byrd.
Thank you. Hey, good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning.
You presented two orders, but what you just spoke about was version 2. Are you suggesting we go with version 2? Is that what
yes. The second version included a paragraph about providing notice to G&E of the vacation and the opportunity to respond within 14 days.
Right. Okay. Well, then I will move version 2 order as presented by Ms. Amir.
Thank you, Commissioner Byrd. We have a motion by Commissioner Byrd and a second by Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. Any discussion on the motion? Mike, please take the roll. Mike Smith.
Sorry, I was speaking. I was muted. Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
Commissioner Hall.
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
Commissioner, the proposed order is approved by a vote of 4-0.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is item 10.3, discussion and potential action regarding 20-205 in the matter of the temporary moratorium on residential utility disconnections during the time period COVID-19 pandemic emergency orders are in effect, as authorized by 17.9.560, 17.10.650, and 17.12.760 NMAC. Before I have Judy provide an overview the order, I'd like to maybe just add some context and the reasons for these potential recommended modifications to previous orders in this docket. On April 29th, we had a workshop that was in response to a bench request that I sent out regarding the status of our moratorium on disconnections order. What we had asked for is we wanted to get a sense for, we're already getting arrearages, but what I wanted was, I wanted information on total number of customer accounts that are subject to disconnection that are on payment plans. And I think that was one of the major pieces of information we had asked for. The other was, which hadn't been reported in our February 3rd order, we had asked for information regarding any federal or state aid. And again, this was only germane, this workshop and this bench request was only for small utilities and electric cooperatives because we have a May 4th expiration date of the disconnection moratorium. And I felt that, we need to assess, to listen, and if necessary, act. And I think that's what this agenda item represents. I'd like my assistant to briefly present Exhibit 1, which is just a consolidation of all the responses. I think it's eye-opening to see that. And before Jonas just briefly presents the compilation of those responses from, again, small utilities and electric co-ops, Donnie Quintana was also a guest speaker at the workshop, and he provided an update on the emergency rental assistance program and noted that they're processing about 100 applications a week, which is quite slow. There's 160 million that they want to obligate by September 30 of this year, which is the end of the federal fiscal year. But he asked utilities to be patient and allow time for their customers to request assistance. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jonas. Jonas, go ahead and just briefly hit the high points of this compilation of the responses that you put together.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner and members. Here is, like Commissioner described, just a compilation of all the responses to that April 19th bench request. I'll just start over here on the left and move to the right. The request asked to identify all residential accounts served by the utility, and they provided that, noting that they serve 243,000 residential accounts. Of those residential accounts, 21,251 or 8.7% are currently in arrears, with a total arrearage of $7.5 million and an average arrears of $354 per account. Of those accounts in arrears, there was some confusion we heard at the workshop over the distinction between in arrears and eligible for disconnection. So as you'll see, there are some co-ops who did not include data there, but we did want to make sure that all the information is in the in arrears column. The focus here on the in arrears and non-installment and eligible for disconnection and non-installment columns, I think, should be on the totals of 393 customers on installments and 50. Overall, that's 98.2% of the folks in arrears who are not in installment plans, which is important here, obviously, because not being on an installment plan leaves you subject to disconnection. We also heard about difficulty or just the timing of the available relief funds not really making its way to customers and utilities yet. And so you see here in these far right columns that from LIHEAP and other assistance, these small utilities reported receiving about $1 million in relief funds. But that compares to, like Mr. Quintana said at the workshop, over $160 million available in the emergency rental assistance program. So that is, I think, the summary of the responses to the meeting or to the bench request, except I did want to highlight this column, installment plans extending beyond November 15th. Commissioners will remember that that's the minimum term for an installment plan, but only 92 installment plans currently in effect extend beyond that date. You know, as a percentage of the installment plans that were reported, it's not terribly low. It's about 20% of the installment plans we heard were in place, but it does show that there's a limited amount of installment plans being entered and some reluctance from utilities to go beyond that date.
Jonas, do you want to just highlight the two questions that we also asked? We asked if utility companies have any recommendations in amending their own administrative procedures to help or alleviate the pressure on their vulnerable customers. And then the other was we asked, do you have any recommendations for amendments to our February 3rd order regarding the disconnection moratoriums? Do you want to just briefly highlight that?
Sure. There were a couple suggestions on or requests on changes to the order, Commissioner Maestas. Those were shortening the minimum repayment term from November 15th to sometime before then. There was not a specific request made on what that shortened date would be, but that was one of the requests we heard in the responses. We also heard requests that the order be amended because currently the February 3rd order provides that an installment plan must be extended to accommodate a customer's need. That's not the exact language, but that's the thrust of it. And there was a request for some more certainty for utilities on installment plans and what the terms of them would have to be. In terms of changes to utility policies, there was a mix there. Some utilities took the position that their administrative policies are approved by PRC and must be adhered to, and they can't make any changes from those without a variance. However, we did hear from at least one company, Zia Natural Gas, who had said they are pausing disconnections when a customer tells them that they have submitted an application for relief funds. Zia said they were doing that for 1 or 2 weeks, but there's, I think, some opportunity there that utilities discussed to do something like that.
All right, Jonas, thank you. And before I turn it over to Judy to go through the order, to our surprise, all the investor-owned utilities opted to participate, even though this workshop was only for small utilities and electric co-ops. And I think one of the bottom lines that they told us is that it's hard to get any kind of action or even a response without some kind of threat of disconnection. And so since the May 4th deadline has not arrived, we felt like we didn't have enough information to see how things are going in terms of customers enrolling in installment or payment plans. And so it was for that primary reason that we're not recommending any changes to the minimum installment plan period that should extend to at least November 15th. As you recall, the significance of the November 15th date is that that's the beginning of the LIHEAP moratorium period. So with that, Judy, would you like to maybe skip the background that we already covered and get to the most recent order?
Yes, Commissioner Maestas. Members of the commission, Commissioner Maestas requested that the Office of General Counsel prepare an order based upon the background information that you've just heard about received in this docket, and in particular, the issues that were discussed at the April 29th workshop. The proposed order does not revise the expiration of the temporary moratorium on the disconnection date set forth in the February 3rd, 2021 order as clarified by the March 17th, 2021 order for all public utilities, except based upon the governor's and the DOH's public health emergency order that has been extended until May 23rd, May 21st, 2021, except for the temporary moratorium shall be continued beyond May 4th, 2021 for small water, small gas, and rural electrics, and beyond August 12th, 2021 for investor-owned electric utilities and large gas companies for as long as the governor's executive or NMDOH public health orders remain in effect, which, as I stated, is currently May 21st, 2021, as follows. So these are the only categories for which a temporary moratorium will continue. A, for residential customers with past due amounts owed that have executed installment plans and are in compliance with those installment agreements. B, for residential customers who have applied for funds through ERAP. I believe that's the acronym for the program run by the Department of Finance, which we had a presentation on at the workshop, or any other state, private, or federal programs while such application is being processed. For all other customers other than A and B, all public utilities shall adhere to Rule 410's protections from disconnection due to non-payment, due to medical and financial certifications, and the forms submitted. And all public utilities shall notify customers of Rule 410's options and assist them as needed prior to disconnection.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Hall.
So before Judy goes on, I think I need to ask a question or two here. And I unfortunately was unable to attend that workshop, but I was very interested in the data here. And, you know, from how we have this worded, unless, and this was our original wording, unless unless customers were on an installment plan or fit within these other categories for extended moratorium periods, and I'm speaking about the small water, gas, and electric co-op customers, it looks like they are now vulnerable to being disconnected under the terms of this language. And in looking at this data, there are so many co-ops that have 0 installment accounts set up. It just occurs to me, I mean, there might even have been a disincentive for them to really be aggressive about trying to get installment plans set up, because it works against their interest for having you know, the opportunity to really push customers harder with disconnection notices at this point. However, some co-ops were somewhat successful in setting up accounts, but, well, actually one, I guess, EPCOR, the water company, set up 40 accounts. But other than that, there were just 3 co-ops, electric co-ops, that set up, you know, a single digit number of accounts. I would say the installment plan option really did not work. And, you know, I don't want to suggest anything. I'm sure it was very difficult to reach out to consumers, but it's just a little discouraging when you can see that there were almost 400 accounts that were vulnerable in terms of being in arrears, and they were eligible for disconnection, and there were only 50 accounts actually set up, 40 of which were by EPCOR. So I don't know, maybe it's just a lesson learned. Maybe we need to find some better way to motivate utilities if this ever happens, co-ops again, if this ever happens. But it just looks to me like, for whatever reason, there weren't installment plans set up. And I understand we got feedback saying it was difficult to get people to respond, but whatever our methodology was that we had suggested, apparently, I don't know, I don't want to blame it on necessarily the methodology. Something didn't work right. I just find it difficult to believe that if a customer knew they had an option to get onto an installment plan and then avoid this March 4th cutoff, that they wouldn't have tried to do it. But I don't know, that's just me. I just wanted to make that comment, I guess. It's frustrating to see this.
One thing that we did hear, Commissioner Hall, is that once May 4th passes, that will be the motivation to get folks on installment plans. And nobody suggested an extension of the moratoriums. And besides, our authority really rests with the governor's public health orders. And it looks like at this point it's going to expire on May 21st unless there's an extension. So really the order that I'm suggesting, there's only really one change, and that is to provide protections for customers that are seeking state and federal aid. The other two are not really changes. We're reiterating that it goes without saying, if you're on an installment plan, you're not going to be disconnected. And then the other reiteration is on our other rules regarding notification and how to administer disconnect notices. And one by one, each co-op have already done extraordinary things in trying to raise the awareness and the attention of their customers through letters and bill stuffers. So it's based on what they told us, and they're doing quite a bit. The IOUs were so enthusiastic about how this information was so enlightening and the discussion around it. They'd like to have a similar workshop prior to the August 12th expiration of the disconnection moratorium for investor-owned utilities and large gas companies. So I think that was a surprising development, in the workshop. And actually, we stole an idea from ZIA, I believe, ZIA Natural Gas, and that was providing some relief and accommodation for their customers that are in the process or have applied for either state and or federal aid.
Okay, thanks for that information. That's reassuring to hear.
Sure. Any other commissioners Byrd or Vicente Aguilar, any comments or questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Byrd.
Thank you. I'm sitting here contemplating how to address this. Kind of want to respond to Commissioner Hall's comments. There is no real incentive for these companies to cut people off, to terminate them, because once they do that, the likelihood of getting payment at all is reduced by quite a bit. They want them to get on a payment plan, because that's one assurance they'll have, that they'll recoup the expenses that they have incurred providing a service. As a business owner, I try not to cut anybody off. You know, if just you can't pay, we're never going to work for you again type thing. Because then that cuts off my potential to earn more money. And that every business has that mindset. And every one of these utilities, they don't want to lose that money that's on that chart. They want to get it back. But if there is no incentive to the individual to take responsibility for their own actions, then they will continue to get electricity or gas for free. And so we have to, at some point, say, okay, on this date, you're going to be cut off. And I think what Commissioner Maestas is proposing is a good, you know, if once they finally realize that they're about to get cut off and they start to look around and find out that, hey, we have options to help in a payment plan or get assistance, then they'll jump on board and get it done before they get the power cut off or within days of having their power cut off, because as you know, that's a real inconvenience. Nobody likes spoiled mayonnaise. So there has to be an incentive on both sides. The incentive for the company to get them on a payment plan or to get them assistance is that they will get paid. The incentive for the customer is that we're not going to continue to give it for free. You will be cut off unless you start doing something. And so, anyway, just want to put another perspective. I don't believe these companies are not doing what they want. They're doing everything they can to get the money that they are owed. And with that, I will move this order as presented.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Byrd. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Second.
All right, a second by Commissioner Hall. Any discussion on the motion? One thing I wanted to add is that the co-op association requested or suggested that the utility assistance part of the emergency rental assistance program be bundled. And that's not possible. The individual customer has got to apply through the process and demonstrate that they're being impacted by COVID-19. But I think that there's already a sense of frustration in the very slow allocation of these relief funds. 160 million, as I've stated before, under the emergency rental assistance program. And there's another, I believe it's under the American Rescue Plan, another 55 million for homeowners that includes utility assistance. That program will be led by the Mortgage Finance Authority. So we're talking about over, almost $250 million for New Mexico alone. A portion of that will be for utility assistance. So I am going to draft a letter for commission consideration to the Treasury Department and copy our congressional delegation to see if there's a way that they can streamline the allocation, at least of the utility assistance, because obviously, requesting rental assistance, I think, is a bit more involved in terms of justification and documentation. But in terms of utility assistance, I think it's a bit simpler. And so I'll be drafting a letter for commission consideration, asking that perhaps that the red tape on the utility assistance side be streamlined to allow for this assistance to get out there, because at 100 applications a day, there is no way they're going to obligate this funding by the end of the federal fiscal year, which is September 30th. So you'll be seeing that. Anyhow, any other further discussion on the motion?
Commissioner Maestas?
Yes, Judy. Yes.
The only thing that we may have forgotten is the reporting requirements that were in the February 3rd order. Do we want them to continue or not for the small water, small gas, and the rural electrics, since the temporary moratorium has expired?
Yeah, I think we should continue the reporting requirements, but I think once the May 4th date comes to pass, if we do have another workshop for the IOUs, getting that data from that workshop might speak to the need to maybe further relax the reporting requirements from our February 3rd original order. As you know, we've relaxed the requirements regarding call notes in discussions with customers that utilities have that are facing disconnection. So not at this point, Judy, unless the commission, wants to revisit that at the next meeting. But I like to see more data that supports changes to our February 3rd order. And thank you for bringing that up, because it will become an issue. Should we have them continue submitting these reports when we're pretty much handing it off to the utilities and, administer these delinquent accounts and manage them, per allowed policies. So anyway, that's my take on it. Any other commissioners have?
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I concur. I like to see more data too before we make any changes. So.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Hall. All right, let's take roll on this vote. Mike Smith?
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
Commissioner Hall.
Aye.
The proposed order passes 4-0.
All right, thank you. We're on to communications with the Chief of Staff. Wayne, you out there?
I'm out here, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. I don't have a lot to update you on this morning. I sort of feel like a broken record in that the only thing I talk about is the move into the Bochum building, but a brief update on that. We did have another visit to the building. I believe it was on Monday morning. There's still some work to be done, and I think we need to have some clear communications with the owner of the building in terms of what our expectations are. There's progress being made. It's not all negative, but we do need to keep this on track and moving forward. And so I'm going to be spending a little bit more time on that this week, having probably some more regular communications and regular visits. And what I think I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman, instead of getting into a lot of detail on this morning, is just to make a point of reaching out to all of the commissioners individually, probably later on this week or early next week, to give you a fuller briefing on that. But it is important, like I said, that we keep this moving forward, and I'm going to make it sure that this is, it has been a priority, but continues to be a priority for me personally. So I think I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chairman, and look forward to talking to each of you, as I mentioned, individually, and just probably a good time for me to check in with you in general as well. But overall, I think we're doing well at the agency, and of course happy to answer any questions that any commissioner has.
All right, thank you, Wayne, for that briefing. Any questions on either the office move-in or anything else? There's no, it's wide open. So commissioners, any questions for Wayne? Wow, that's pretty good.
I'll take it.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you for that update.
Well, actually, sorry, I just thought of a question. Is there a more recent floor plan than the ones we got from Jason Montoya, or are they essentially the same still? I assume they wouldn't vary, but I just was curious.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Hall, there is a more recent floor plan, and I'd be happy to, I probably am remiss in not having done that already. I'd be happy to send that out to the commissioners.
I'd like to see it. That'd be nice.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Oops.
You're
any other
muted.
Commissioners have any questions for Wayne?
Yeah, I have one, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Byrd. Yes, sir.
You did say it's wide open. So what is that red and yellow snake hanging on the wall behind you?
Oh, actually, that's an artist from Nigeria, quite famous Nigerian artist. He's passed now. His name is Chief Olarontoba. I knew him when I was in Nigeria. I had a chance to meet him when I was living and working there. It's actually the head of a, if I'm looking at, thinking that you're looking at the same thing I am, it's actually the head of a woman. It's made out of cloth strings that are dyed with traditional dyes in Nigeria. Chief Oluwantobo was quite the character. He actually used to display his art here in Santa Fe at a local gallery as well. But quite the character. He had or claimed to have over 20 wives and more than 100 children. And having known him for a number of years, I think that may have actually been true. But that's what that is. I have a couple of pieces from him.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair,
Yep, that was
I'd
wide
like to
open.
thank,
Yes,
I'd like-
Commissioner Hall.
I'd like to thank Commissioner Byrd for the question. Very interesting.
You're quite welcome.
Okay.
You all are getting a little jiggy because this is such a brief meeting. All right, any other questions for Wayne? All right, let's move on to communications with General Counsel. Mike, do you have anything?
I'll keep Commissioner Byrd happy. We don't have anything today.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, he's not off the hook. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Mike?
He said we don't have anything.
But I have some good stuff. I just wanted to, shout out to Russell Fisk. I heard his Supreme Court oral argument regarding CenturyLink. So anyway, kudos. I thought he did a great job. I don't know if the Supreme Court's made a decision yet on that, but based on their questions, I think it looks good for us, but we'll see. Russell, has there been a decision?
Mr. Vice Chair, there has not been a decision yet. It will, if it's like the most recent CenturyLink appeal of the rulemaking, I believe that they basically did a sort of summary order dismissing the appeal instead of a full opinion. I think it took a week or two. I mean, we could hope that might happen here as well. So that would be fairly quick. But we'll wait and see. Thank you for recognizing my work, and yeah, I had a good time on that one. Hopefully, we'll win.
Thanks, Russell. Great job. My last good stuff is I wanted to recognize Office of General Counsel for developing this look ahead, a 1-month forecast report. It's going to help me immensely as a commissioner to see what's coming up. The only suggestion I'd make is if we could consolidate the individual reports and then maybe put the cases in chronological order by commission action. That way we can see them in chrono order and have them consolidated, but it is wonderful. So I think it's a great first draft, great first step. So thank you, Mike and OGC staff.
I would like to concur in that too, Mr. Vice Chair. It's just was a great relief to see that. It just really helps me organize my time. So I appreciate it. And I like the idea of a chronological display as well, but I'm very grateful for what I got. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Any other comments or questions for General Counsel? All right, let's move on. Communications with commissioners. Any commissioners?
Mr. Vice Chair, I've got one thing to report. With respect to the integrated resource plan and procurement rule we've been working on, I haven't sent anything to the commissioners yet. We had a very productive meeting last week. However, we met to see if there were what to finalize. And we ended up meeting, we planned for 1 hour, ended up meeting for 2.5 hours. And so I think we probably won't get it to the commission for another 2 weeks. There are just more little things to work out. I'm looking at the 19th, hopefully when we can bring this to the commission, but that time period will provide for, a good opportunity for commissioners to be looking at it in advance as well. We'll distribute it. And hopefully within the next, by the next week. So just wanted to give you that update. It's So definitely a work in progress, but we're very close to the end, but we just wanted to be thorough about it. So it's on the way. Yeah.
Great job. Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Anything else, Commissioner Hall? Anything else? All right, Commissioners Bird and Vicente Aguilar, anything you'd like to
No,
add?
sir.
Ladies first, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to request an open meeting cancellation. I believe it's May the 19th. I'm going to be attending a training the whole week. This is by New Mexico State University. So I don't know if the other commissioners have registered, but I have registered.
Mike, how do we handle, or Wayne, perhaps, I don't know if we can take a poll. You can't really take a poll. It seems fairly benign but I don't know what we have coming up for next week. So perhaps, Mike, do you have a sense for the May 19th meeting? I will say that I'm going to be tied up the week of May 10th. I'm attending the NARUC utility rate school, and it does go through next Wednesday, but I'm going to do my best to try and multitask. But I certainly wouldn't ask to postpone next week's meeting just for me. So I have no idea, Commissioner. Mike, do you have a sense for what we have going on May 19th?
I actually will not be here that meeting. Judy will be substituting for me. I'm trying to look up the forecast that we just sent out. Other OGC, if you want to interrupt and let people know, answer that question.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question of you, actually?
Sure.
Your training on May 10th, is that the Michigan class? Because I wanted to sign up for that. And what in the past, what we have done is if there are a number of commissioners signed up for a class, then we usually do cancel the meeting for that week. Or, I don't know if it's possible to schedule it on a day when the class isn't occurring for the same week. We could maybe do that as well, but I need to get my hours in, and I'm interested in either of those classes on the 10th or the week of the 10th or the week of the 19th. And I particularly wanted to go to the Michigan, but I haven't looked it up yet. Are you going to one that's co-sponsored by Michigan and NARUC?
Well, this one's NARUC, and this one's completely online. It's not in person.
Right.
And this is the one, I think, the rate school for states west of the Mississippi. I think it's a Western rate school, but it's continuous. It goes all the way through full days, May 10th through the 14th. And the Wednesday session during our meeting is, kind of cost of capital structure. So it's really important. So I don't know. I think I'm iffy, and they've instructed us that you ought to consider that you're completely off. You're dedicating 100% of your time and attention to the rate school.
I think that's correct. We should.
And when I tried to register about 2 months ago, they were booked, and they made an exception for me because I was a commissioner, because it's open to other commission staff, and so they squeezed me in. So I don't know if you can enroll for this particular one, but it's certainly worth a try.
I'm going to look into that as soon as we get off this meeting. But I would like to inquire of Mike what the agenda looks like for next week, if they have a clue. Is it going to be heavy or light? Because I may not be able to attend either if I need to take this class, and if I can get in. And I will.
Why don't we do this, commissioners? Why don't I get with Mike offline?
Yeah.
And Wayne, because I think Wayne needs to weigh in on this, and see if we can cancel either the May 12th or May 19th. I don't foresee us canceling both. So we ought not to, postpone the meeting. So let me get with Mike and Wayne and look at both of those meetings, the May 12th and the May 19th meeting, to see if we can consolidate those and determine which one we should have.
And I would also maybe connect with Commissioner Vicente Aguilar too, because I believe she said her class was also a NARIC sponsored one. So
I think hers is the New Mexico State CPU training. Commissioner Vicente Aguilar, is that it? It's a week-long course, right? Hosted by New Mexico State?
Right. It's a week-long course, and normally our general counsel will take a tally how many commissioners have registered. If it's more than 3, it's most likely it can be canceled, but it's up to Michael Smith.
Okay, has anyone else registered? I realize Steve's not here, but Commissioner Byrd, have you signed up for either one of these classes, the NARUC Rate School or the NMSU CPU class?
I was looking at my calendar. I don't see him on there, but that doesn't mean I wasn't registered.
I wonder if you guys are talking about the same course. Is that possible? Because CPU, Center for Public Utility, is at New Mexico State, and they always do a week-long course, and it's NARIC sponsored. There's only 2 NARIC sponsored courses in the country, and that's New Mexico State and Michigan. If it's not Michigan, it must be the New Mexico State. I don't know.
I'm certain that I'm in the NARUC Rate School because we've already had some preliminary activities. In fact, I think this afternoon I have a team meeting. They broke us up into teams, and so we've already begun basically the rate school, but the steady full day curriculum starts next week for me.
I see. All right.
So
Commissioner,
yes, Judy.
As a whole, I know that Commissioner Hall mentioned putting the IRP rule on the 19th. And the 26th, we have a potential hearing. I'm not sure what else is on the 26th, but we have several different matters scheduled for the 12th already.
Thanks for that, Mr. Chair. Let me just respond.
Yeah, Commissioner Hall, yeah.
So I appreciate that information, Judy. And I was thinking about the fact that I was hoping to get the rulemaking on the 19th, but if there is a course that I have to take or other commissioners have to take that would require us to cancel, I would present it on the next week. I don't, we do have to get our training in, and that can only happen at certain times when the courses are given. So I would have to flex that presentation of the rule. That's how I would deal with that.
The way I see it now is we only have one conflict by one commissioner on the May 12th meeting, which is me, and only one conflict by one commissioner on May 19th, which sounds like it's not enough to cancel either of those meetings. But Commissioner Hall, let me know if you do sign up for a course that might be in conflict with May 12th or May 19th. And then I think we can take a closer look to see what action items we have and whether we can move them to the subsequent meeting. So let's do that. At this point, no concrete cancellations, but we'll take a look at workload. And I think if Commissioner Hall enrolls with this class that also presents a conflict, then I think we should consider canceling one of those meetings.
Thank you.
How does that sound?
Sounds like a good start.
Okay. Any other communications with commissioners? Anybody else? Any other commissioners have any comments? All right. I just wanted to give everyone an update on the community solar contract with Stratagen that you all approved last week. It's fully executed and it has been submitted to General Services and Department of Finance Administration for approval. We had an internal meeting last week and we created a PRC Community Solar Action Team that'll include representation from Commission leadership, Office of General Counsel, Utility Division, and Sarah Valencia. The team will lead our work with Strategen to develop and work through a stakeholder engagement process and finalize a rule by the statutory deadline of April 1st. And then my last update is on rules 440 and 592. Jonas and Rob have been working together along with Jack Sidler and others in the agency in considering potential amendments to rule 440 and 592. We expect to open a docket to amend and bring clarity to the scope of 440 filings and the connection to rule 592, which is the safe harbor provision. Safe harbor provision and the rule itself requires some clarifications as well in terms of definition of key terms. So yeah, special thanks to the Utility Division in working with Rob and Jonas and identifying, and OGC in identifying issues to address in these two rules. So that's all I have. Anybody else have any final comments? Any left field Commissioner Byrd kind of comments?
Hey, mine come out of right field.
Okay, if there's no other comments, we are adjourned. Thank you all. Happy Cinco de Mayo.
Thank you.
Happy Cinco de Mayo. Yeah.
Well done today, Mr. Chair.
Que viva el PRC. Can I hear a que viva?
Que viva.
Okay. All right, we're adjourned. Bye.